For 2 centuries, the British rule in India was a story of ruthless exploitation, racism, mass starvation and loot on a scale that can only be measured in trillions of pounds. But you see, that supremacist mindset did not vanish when the British were finally kicked out in 1947. Unbelievable as it may sound, the colonial attitude continued. And here's a horror story from the 1960s. Today, hearts are breaking in Britain over something that happened in the 1960s. Something inhumane, something beyond racist. In the 1960s, a British scientist named Peter Elwood decided to study iron deficiency among South Asians. In other words, why South Asian women don't have enough iron in their body. And to study that, Elwood zeroed in on 21 Indian origin women. He made them his samples and part of this wretched experiment. In the days and weeks that followed, Elwood fed these women radioactive chapatis. Chapatis with iron 59 would be delivered to their homes. A quick Google search will tell you what iron 59 is. An iron isotope. It emits beta particles and gamma rays. Iron 59 can harm your lungs, your blood. It can also cause cancer. And those dealing with iron 59 are recommended to wear safety gloves and footwear cover. And those who come into contact with this dangerous radioactive material are told to get rid of the contaminated clothes and wash themselves with soap. But what do you do when you are fed this radioactive material? What do you do when iron 59 is introduced to your body, not by accident, but by design? And these women did not know what was happening to their bodies or what was hidden in those chapatis. In fact, they did not even volunteer for this killer experiment. These Indian origin women were recent immigrants to Britain. Most of them did not speak English, and the British took advantage of this. Their general practitioner leaked their personal health details to Elwood, and Elwood made the most of it. The MRC, or Medical Research Council, that was funding the study, saw nothing ethically wrong with what was happening. By the 1960s, British repression of Indians was normalized beyond measure. So the study went on. Over 20 lives were risked. The health of their subsequent generations was risked. What for? When the study came to an end, the celebrated Cambridge scientists concluded Asian women should take extra iron. It's like saying ample rain is a must to prevent a drought, or eating 3 balanced healthy meals a day is a solution to malnutrition. We already know this. The English scientists did not need a study to figure out why women from India were iron deficient. All they had to do was look into the mirror, look into the treatment his country had meted out to Indian women, Indian men and children from India. The British are the culprits of India's anemia problem, iron deficiency problem, and almost every health problem. In 1608, the British East India Company docked on one of the world's richest countries, and India, that was a major player in the world's export market and a leader in textile exports. The British troops destroyed looms, literally. The company imposed punitive duties on the export of Indian textile, depopulated textile industry-rich cities like Dhaka, Murshidabad, cut the thumbs of weaves. When the British came to India, India accounted for nearly 24% of the global output. 200 years of repression and loot later, when the British left India, the country was one of the poorest in the world, barely contributing 2% of the global output. The British left India in crutches, economically and health-wise. Over 70% of India's population was poverty-stricken, courtesy British cruelty. Yet somehow it was too tough for a Cambridge scientist to realize that the poor don't really have access to iron-rich food or food in general. You don't need a deadly radioactive experiment to tell you that the British Raj is why Indian women had iron deficiency. But you know why? You do need a scientist with a colonial hangover to carry out a brutal experiment involving radioactive chapatis. Ask yourself this: would Elwood have fed radioactive sandwiches to British women? You know the answer, and it's a no. You see, such experiments would never have been carried out on British women, on British men. Also, the truth is, the British never really treated Indians as human beings. Every story of the British Raj, every display of the colonial mindset is a reminder of this strange fact. The British did not care whether an Indian lives or dies. The many famines of Bengal are examples. The first one to strike was in the year 1770. Around 10 million women were killed, 10 million people were killed. That's more than the number of Jews killed by Hitler. And half of the population of Bengal was wiped out during the British orchestrated 1770 famine. The British had ignored signs of a famine, increased land taxes, drained food reserves, and the British were just getting started. In 1771, the British East India Company raised the land tax to 60%. It was trying to compensate itself for the death of peasants. You heard that right, compensate. You see, fewer peasants resulted in fewer crops and a drop in the revenue. And so the British decided to make up for the lost profits with an increased tax. And in the years that followed, the British would force farmers into growing cash crops. The food crop reserve would be exhausted. Multiple famines would follow. In 1783, 1866, 1873, 1892, 1897, or in 1943 to 44, over 3 million Indians would die. Many Indians would be forced to eat grass, even human flesh, just to survive. Children were sold, abandoned, sometimes even killed out of mercy by their mothers. The infamous British wartime Prime Minister Winston Churchill would compare the dying people of Bengal to rats that were paying the price for breeding too much. Coming back to the experiment, let me tell you, and the concerned British, that iron deficiency is just one of the many legacies of the empire. The colonial rule is one of the reasons why India has become the world's diabetes capital. There is the reason why Indians don't easily burn calories. It's because our bodies have changed following the multiple famines. And today it refuses to easily let go of calories in the fear that another famine may just be a meal away. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the updates on the move.